Hi everyone. Got a report today that it's been reported that Handford is leaking yet another tank. We have a report on the Tri-City Herald here. It was dated on April 29th of 2021. And it says aging Handford tank is leaking radioactive waste into the ground, feds say. Now this is the site here. If this is the video that I've seen, this one's pretty good. You can kind of see what this place is made of and the buildings and the sites. Interesting note, the reactors that are in the Navy vessels, when they are decommissioned, they are brought to Handford to be buried. So that's an interesting note about this site. The U.S. Department of Energy heads of this site. Office of Environmental Management mission is to complete the cleanup of the Cold War legacy and manage the remaining nuclear materials, including at Handford. This is a pretty cool site here where you can actually play the article. But since I'm speaking, you won't be able to hear it. So I'll go ahead and just read it for you. Richland, Washington. An underground Handford tank holding 123,000 gallons of radioactive waste appears to be leaking contaminated liquid into the ground, according to the Department of Energy. This is the second of Handford's 149 single-shell tanks, believed to be currently leaking waste, although in the past, 67 tanks are suspected of leaking. The most recently discovered leaker is tank B109, which was one of the earliest waste storage tanks built. It was constructed during World War II and received waste from Handford sites operations from 1946 to 1976. 1946 to 1976. Wow, that's 30 years. It's a long time to put a lot of material into one tank. Handford's 149 single-shell tanks were built to hold a mix of high-level radioactive and other hazardous chemical waste from chemically processing irradiated uranium to remove plutonium. So that's the whole point. That's where plutonium comes from, is from uranium. So wherever uranium is used, which is at every nuclear power plant, U-235, then plutonium is produced from that U-235. It is a daughter. It is part of the chain, which I believe it creates its own chain. There's a uranium chain and a plutonium chain. The Handford site in eastern Washington was used from World War II through the Cold War to produce about 2/3 of the plutonium for the nation's nuclear weapons program. The Washington State Department of Ecology and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, both Handford regulators, were notified Thursday morning that the tank was likely leaking. There is no increased health or safety risk to Handford workers or the public, the Department of Energy said in a message to Handford site employees Thursday. Which I don't believe that. Okay, this is when they were building them. So this is their makeup. You can kind of see the progression from right to left, how they're built. If you look up top, there's a vehicle. So you can kind of understand the size of these tanks. They're massive. So you can probably fit about 30 or 40 of them vehicles in one of them tanks. So Handford Underground Waste Tank B109 is among the 16 shown under construction in the B Tank Farm in the center of the nuclear reservation during World War II. Any contamination from the leak is expected to take more than 25 years to reach the water table, which is about 210 to 240 feet below the tank. Okay, let's break that down. Any contamination from the leak, okay, any contamination, so they are admitting that there is contamination from the tank that is leaking into the ground. So that is an admittance right there. Okay. The groundwater flows slowly over decades towards the Columbia River from the central Handford, where tank B109 is located. So eventually this water, they say 25 years, will flow to the Columbia River. Now, Boomer U, I want to give a shout out for Boomer U. Go to his channel. Great channel. Subscribe, please. He has tons of information. But he speaks of this, where there's studies that have been produced of radioactivity within the aquifers and how they flow in and out and enter the water system and the water cycle that then flow around the planet. Okay. Yeah, guys have to understand, once the stuff hits water that is acidic, it changes how it's going to bond with water and react to other molecules. And that changes the entire issue. That's why the fuel is surrounded in a zirconium cladding. This is why, is to keep any type of acidic water from getting to the fuel that will cause water solubility to mix with the water and then bond with it. That's why these reactors must have the most alkaline water used inside the reactors and in the fuel pools. Okay, we got people dying of thirst, but yet we're purifying some of the most purest water on the planet goes into these reactors. And I don't think that's right. To say, well, if we don't produce this power like this, then some people will die. Well, the fact that you're using fresh water, using energy to purify it, and then wasting it into a reactor, the thinking there, the thought process, the whole trying to justify that makes no sense. Just like 25 years. Oh, it's going to take 25 years, so it's okay. Anybody alive today, it won't bother them until 25 years down the line. Well, that's the wrong type of thinking. That's people in the future. Okay? Could we all agree that's not correct? That's saying, okay, well, we contaminated the soil and people in the future will pay for it. That's okay. I don't think that's correct. Up to 3,000 gallons leaked. Okay? Which, out of those tanks, you're talking hundreds of thousands of gallons in a tank. 3,000 isn't a whole lot. So, but there has been massive leaks in the past here. And this is going to be a never-ending thing until this site is completely cleaned up. And this is why nuclear should not happen. It's because of things like this. This is over and over. We see sites like this all over the planet. I mean, look at Lake Karachi, or however you say it in Russia, Eastern Russia. I mean, you stand next to this lake for an hour and you will die just by standing there. How is this acceptable? I know a lot of this stuff was done back in the Cold War and all that, but we are still furthering the use of this. Same fuel, same waste, kicking the can down the road, no answer for the waste. Why everything sits in dry cask at each site. That is unacceptable. Moving on, Tank B109 was initially observed to be leaking up to 3.5 gallons of radioactive liquid a day, but may be leaking far less on many days, according to DOE, or far more on many days. At a maximum, it may be, because if they don't know if it's far less, then they don't know if it's far more either. At a maximum, it may have leaked about 3,000 gallons of waste, said Ben Harp, the deputy manager of the DOE Office of River Protection. Okay, Ben Harp. Everybody needs to write Ben Harp An email. I know he has an email address. Everybody needs to write to Ben and say hi. Hi, Ben. It appears to be leaking waste at a higher rate than the other single shell tanks that has had a leak confirmed in recent years. Single walled tanks, which they look pretty thick. You're looking probably, oh gosh, I can't even imagine to take a guess, but definitely really thick walled tanks. But they are single walled. There's no backup in case. And these were buried, a century ago or half a century ago. So metal only lasts so long, people. Even our best metals that we can develop, which the ones that are so specialized, they're so expensive, it's not even cost effective to go down that road to begin with. But even our best metals, you're talking 100 years, maybe. 100 years. This stuff requires a century or more of storage. And that makes it right there not worth it. There's so many things that makes nuclear power not worth it. Handford underground tanks for radioactive waste shown under construction have held radioactive waste since as early as World War II. In 2013, when DOE confirmed that the tank T111 was leaking, it said liquid levels were decreasing at a rate of 150 to 300 gallons a year, or half a gallon to a gallon a day. From the 1990s to about 2005, DOE removed as much pumpable liquid as possible from the single-shell tanks, leaving radioactive sludge and salt cake in the tanks to address concerns about leaks. So what you're saying is what was left was super concentrated, and whatever couldn't be mixed into the water. Okay, this is one we did empty out. Harp said of tank B109. So this is one we did empty out. Empty out. So is it unlike tank 111 where there was sludge and salt cake still left in the bottom? Or is it, as he says, this one we did empty out? Of course, there would be some residue and stuff left even if they got it completely out. But at any rate, there's going to be some more leakage from these tanks. So they need to get them all out. And as we read further, you can see what they're doing at this site. And we'll kind of speak to that. DOE estimates that the tank, which has a capacity of 530,000 gallons, has about 2,000 gallons of liquid waste still... 2,000 gallons of liquid waste sitting above the sludge and salt cake solids that it holds. Okay, so it does still hold the sludge and the salt cake solids. In addition, an estimated 13,000 gallons of liquids may be held up in the tank's solid waste, similar to the way a sponge holds water, Harp said. Okay. So it is bonded to these molecules. And when they emptied it, they didn't unbond. Okay. Tank B109 is not one of the previously suspected leakers. Handford soil contaminated. But it is in an area that has soil already contaminated with radioactive material. Contamination in this area is not a new issue, and mitigation actions have been in place for decades. Department of Energy said it in its message to Handford employees. Rebar. Sort of stack coming out of it. Yeah, not sure. A historical Handford site photo shows a man working on a construction of an underground tank to hold radioactive waste at the Handford Nuclear Reservation. Washington State Department of Ecology. The 16 underground tanks that make up the B tank farm had 10 assumed leaker tanks previously. 10. Okay? They are estimated to have leaked or spilled 157,000 gallons of liquid tank waste into the soil beneath them. Let me read that back. They are estimated to have leaked or spilled 157,000 gallons of liquid tank waste into the soil beneath them. They're not really specifying exactly what the waste contains, okay? Chemicals and radioactive water and fluids and liquid, and I'm certain there's a breakdown of it somewhere. This site has been studied so much, so I understand it is probably well known what's in the tanks, but my point is evaporation, bonding, movement. If it's getting into the soil, then it's getting into the aquifer, and this has been decades happening. So for all we know, it could have been leaking from the get-go. And this gentleman here had a bad weekend, and when he came in on Monday, he didn't quite fit that rebar right and missed a weld, and something didn't just quite go as planned, so now it's leaking decades later. See what I'm saying? How easy that is? This happens all the time because we humans are imperfect beings, and this takes perfection. In addition, battery power 14%. In addition, two adjoining tank farms, the BX and BY tank farms, with a total of 24 single-shell tanks, are believed to have leaked or spilled about 200,000 gallons of waste in the past. Okay. So we have another two sets, BX and BY, of 24 total. So we're figuring 12 at each section. Okay. Of 200,000 gallons of waste in the past. However, the largest source of contamination comes from the historic practice of disposing of radioactive liquids in trenches and tile fields. At the BX and BY tank farms, an estimated 51 million gallons of contaminated liquids were poured into the ground. Okay? So, the most important issue is 51 million gallons, which is an absolute estimation. It is a lowball estimation. We all know that. It would have to be just common sense. They're not going to tell you exactly what their estimates are. Okay? 51 million gallons. With some contaminated already reaching... Okay, with some contamination already reaching groundwater in central Handford, DOE is pumping up contaminated water and cleaning it at the Handford 200 waste pump and treat plant. Okay, so they have some sort of wastewater treatment facility like the Alps in Fukushima. One of the extraction wells to pump up contaminated groundwater is near tank B109. So that's their answer. They dig a well, then they wait for the water to go into the well, and then they pump it out of the well till it gets dry, and then they allow it to fill again and pump it out. So they're hoping that the vast majority will run into that well and that it won't make it to the aquifer. But that is not a surefire way. I mean, we're putting so much of this stuff into the ground. It's astronomical how much we're doing. See? Treated well. Contaminated well. 210 to 240 feet. That eventually makes it to the Columbia River. It all flows to the Columbia River, so no doubt there's no chance of it going anywhere else other than towards the Columbia River and into the aquifer. So this is a definite. And guys, this is on the West Coast. If it's evaporating, if it's bonding to the water and evaporating, flowing with the water molecules, then it is flowing over the entire nation of the United States. Hanford officials are concerned about the radioactive iodine and technetium in the leaking waste because it does not bind to the soil like other radioactive isotopes in the waste, making it move toward groundwater faster. Okay, iodine, which if it's iodine 131, then that's an 8-day type of thing. There's other isotopes that last longer of it. So obviously, those aren't the only two that don't bind to the soil. Okay, we must make this very clear. This is their games that they play. Handford officials are concerned. So this is a quote from a Handford official that said, well, Jim, we're worried about the iodine and the technetium, and so they write that down and they assume and they let the public assume that those are the only two that are worried about. But if we're talking about water soluble and acidic conditions with redox and pH, and then it becomes an issue. That's the entire reason this is a problem. If it all stayed where it was at, like if all we had to worry about is the atomic weight, then I could almost get behind nuclear power. But the fact of the matter is, none of this stays where it first originates from, where we put it, where we concentrate it and put it and use it. Both are radioactive isotopes the 200 West Pump and Treat plant was designed to remove from groundwater. The leak from tank B109 was first suspected in March of 2019 by DOE tank farm contractor Washington River Protection Solutions after a normal reading in December 2018. Okay, I want to stop right here and mention something. Tank farmers. I want you guys to look up the tank farmers. Years ago, I'd actually phoned one of these tank farmers up and spoke with him on the phone a couple of times, a couple of occasions. And I was supposed to have an interview with him, and something fell through, and I don't know what happened. But anyways, we had gotten to talk, and he had breathed something in out there, and it caused major issues with his lungs. And now he used to be a real fit person, and now he can barely make it up and down stairs. I mean, he gets so lightheaded and he can't breathe, and there's massive issues. And when he goes to die, his death will not be attributed to nuclear power. It'll just be whatever disease he has. It'll be attributed to that. That's the cause of death. When effect is the death that they're naming, not the cause. We need the cause, not the effect of death. Okay? These poor guys out here trying to clean up, 50 years ago, their mess. It's unbelievable. The B Tank farm in central Handford is shown in April 2021. One of the farm's 16 underground tanks is believed to be same. There appeared to be a drop in level of the liquid sitting atop the solid waste, but monthly checks that started in March 2019 showed the level stable until July 2020. Then another drop was detected. Okay. So, it was a dropping before. There appeared to be a drop before, but then they started doing checks in March of 2019, and it showed the levels was stable up until July. Then another drop was detected. So how is this not an emergency? You're talking a whole year later, and this tank is still sitting in the ground. They're still monitoring the levels of it, and it's starting to leak again. Now, you have to learn your lesson the first time. Come on. This is what we are paying these people for. Department of Energy. Government. We are paying these people to do this to us. Okay? And this must stop. The level of waste in the tanks can fluctuate as small amounts of liquid from the precipitation may enter the underground tanks, liquid evaporates, and waste moves and settles. Okay, that's a very important sentence there. The level of waste in the tanks can fluctuate as small amounts of liquid from precipitation may enter the underground tanks, liquid evaporates, and waste moves and settles. Okay? Liquid evaporates. What they won't tell you is what is bonded within that liquid. In July 2020, a formal leak assessment was launched. It included continued monthly checks of waste levels and lowering cameras through the risers or pipes from inside the tanks to the ground surface to observe the surface of the waste. The final step in determining that the tank likely was leaking was a meeting of a contractor technical review board on Thursday to review data and findings. What's next for leak? DOE has some possible methods to address the leak and resulting soil contamination, Harp said. DOE has installed 3 ground-level plastic or asphalt barriers over areas of 2 tank farms to prevent rain and snowmelt from carrying contamination already in the soil deeper towards the groundwater. So they put plastic and then asphalted over the plastic. Okay. A barrier also could be installed over the B tank farm. Could also, so it isn't yet. There is a barrier installed over the T tank farm, which was constructed before the leak from tank T11 was detected. An exhauster also was installed in tank T11 to help evaporate tank liquids. To help evaporate tank liquids. An exhauster also was installed in tank T11 to help evaporate tank liquids into the air, or is this being filtered somehow? Okay. So, let's kind of give you an overview of the area and an idea. Which, I mean, I'm sure a map isn't doing it justice. This has to be a massive area. Yeah, look at the map up here on the right. Won't let me go over, but see the shaded area. That's a massive area. Tri-Cities, Handford, Columbia River's right there. Yeah, this is a horrible site, and it has been for a very long time. Less likely is removing as much liquid waste as possible from the tank and mixing it with a concrete-like grout for disposal, possibly outside of Washington State. Okay? So, they're going to ship it somewhere else. So, we might as well just contaminate everywhere. Emptying the tank is possible, but would be expensive. Okay. But it would be expensive. Okay. To date, most of the waste from at least 17 of the site's 149 single shell tanks have been emptied into sturdier, newer double shell tanks until the waste can be treated for disposal. Well, how long is it going to take for them to treat this water? This liquid, I mean. This is why this should not be done. Can you see the process that it takes to clean up after this? DOE is working to start glassifying, which is vitrification, some of Handford's liquid tank at the 17 billion vitrification plant, by the end of 2023, preparing the waste for permanent disposal. Vitrification, you're talking glass, okay? That's only to help the water, because water solubility is the issue. So that's my whole point. It's not external exposure, it's not this or that. It's always been the major issue of nuclear power and nuclear weapons is the water solubility issue, which promotes mobility in the environment. Okay. Handford has 27 double shell tanks after a 28th tank was emptied and taken out of service when it sprang a leak between its shells. So one of the ones that they built sprang a leak in between the shells. So they can't even build a tank that can hold this crap. You understand? With the waste believed to be trapped between the shells as the tank was designed to do. However, tank B109 is in the 200 East area, about 2 miles from a double shell tank. Infrastructure associated with the tank dates from 1940s. Constructing piping to move the waste from tank B109 to a double shell tank could cost hundreds of millions of dollars, Harp said. Now DOE is working on emptying single shell tanks with updated infrastructure in place. So, that would be so costly and so expensive. Okay? Are you listening to what they're saying? So when they try to tell you nuclear power is so cheap, it can't be metered, right? So cheap it can't be metered. And this is why we need nuclear, because it's so cheap. More bang for the buck, right? More bang for the buck. This is not true, because it's so expensive to clean up after it. So expensive. The whole vitrification, trying to even make that into existence. All they did was make something up and try to move it to one thing into another, which is better from one thing to another, but it does not change it. It is still the same. If that glass breaks, it will still contaminate the same as it not being in that glass. This is why uranium glass is dangerous, because if it breaks, you can inhale that. Once inhaled, the distance is gone to the source. The Peckel effect. Wow, this has been a long one, huh? So, Handford. This is a bad site. Look into this. We got a brand new leak. 3,000 gallons already. And this is some of the most contaminated stuff that we ever produced during World War II. This is the worst of the worst is in these tanks. And it's been decades in the making trying to come up with something to do with it. There's just no answers. The cart is always put in front of the horse, and they're flying by the seat of their pants. All of them. All of them. Every physicist, every scientist, they're literally flying by the seat of their pants, making it up as they go along. That's right. I'll debate anybody on that fact. Anyone. We can go down each road and we can talk about it, and we can show how there is issues with every single thing that we do. From carbon-14 dating to CERN. Yep, muons. They don't even know what they're doing. So, alright guys, look into this. The site's horrible, and contact, what was his name again? Ben? I think it was Ben, wasn't it? Yeah, Ben. Let's find him real quick just so we can end it on that. So everybody contacts Mr. Ben. I think it's Ben something. Ben Harp, the DOE Office of River Protection. He is the Deputy Manager of DOE Office of River Protection. Ben Harp. Give him a call, send him an email, stop by his office, and give him a hug, a wave, a hi for me. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching me, and hope this all helps. We all need to share this and get this out there. So, all right, bye.